Thomas Desmond here, developer advocate at Sitecore, and today I want to talk about adding flexibility to Jamstack with Vercel Edge Middleware. There's two big factors on how Vercel Edge Middleware adds flexibility, and first, it pushes logic to the CDN layer. We push our logic as close to our users as possible so we keep that speed of Jamstack. And second, we now have more information available to us. We can look at the requests that's coming in and modify the responses we give back inside of Vercel Edge Middleware. So now we can look at the request, cookies, header, geolocation information, and modify where we send our users based on that. So we get the speed of Jamstack, but we also can add flexibility. Let's take a look at how it's done. The first thing that I want to share is the architecture of a standard Jamstack application. What we have here is a fully statically rendered application. And I want to show this so that we can see how Jamstack and Vercel Edge functions work together. Now there's a whole lot going on here, so let's break it down piece by piece. On the left-hand side, we have our build and deploy time, and on the right-hand side, we have our request time. Now the big thing with Jamstack is that we want to build and create all of our resources at build time. So you're going to see a lot more work on that left-hand side where we're rendering all of our pages at build time so that we get those super fast requests and responses on the right side. So the scenario here is that I'm working on my app. I'm in my dev environment. I want to push out my changes. I've added a page, changed some styles, changed some content. I push that content up to GitHub. And now Vercel, where my application is hosted, they recognize that new changes have been pushed to GitHub. So they're going to say, well, I want to build out every single page based on this new code that has been deployed. So steps 2 and 3 here is going to fetch all of our data, call out different CMS, call out to our repositories, call out to our databases, call out to get any data that it needs for a page, pull that data in, and build the page. And it does this for every single page. And now there's quite a few different optimizations and caching strategies that go on here, but at its simplest, if new code is being pushed, we're going to rebuild every single one of the pages. Once our pages have been built, they will go out to the CDN or the Content Delivery Network, and that is where all requests will be handled. So now when a request comes in, no page rendering has to happen. We've done that ahead of time at build time, but the request comes into the CDN and directly goes back down to the user where they see the content or they see the page that we've delivered to them. So this is a really quick overview of the Jamstack architecture, where on the left-hand side at build and deploy time, we are doing all of our data fetching, we're doing all of our page rendering, and on the right side, we just have the request time going directly to the CDN and back down to the users. How does this fit in with Vercel Edge Middleware? Well, the great piece is that this Edge Middleware is going to live inside of our CDN. Vercel Edge Middleware allows us to push logic to the Content Delivery Network layer so that we can look at requests that come in and modify the response we send back based on that request. So the user was already going to be going to the Content Delivery Network. Why not sprinkle a little bit of logic in there to look at the request and modify the response that we send back? We now have access to cookie information, geolocation information, IP information, header information at request time in the Jamstack app because of Vercel Edge Middleware. And now this is big. This is big for Jamstack. If you're used to client-side rendering or server-side rendering, you're going to be like, well, I've always had that information to me. I've always known who the user was. But this is different. This is big for Jamstack. In Jamstack, normally, we've already built our content ahead of time, and now we have no idea who our user is. We just send them the content that was built maybe days, weeks ago. But now with Vercel Edge Middleware, we can see where our user is making the request from and send them to a page that's personalized for them. Maybe if they're coming from Japan, we can send them to the page that's already been translated to Japanese. Or they're coming from a particular state in the US, we can send them to content that's specific to that state. This is where the flexibility comes in because now we can redirect or rewrite users to a more personalized page that's more relevant to them, pushing that logic into the Content Delivery Network layer where we're able to look at the request and modify the response that we send back. So how do we get started with pushing logic to the edge? Vercel has made it extremely easy to get started with Vercel Edge Middleware. They handle the security, the infrastructure, the distribution of it across their CDN network, and all we have to do is tell them what function and what logic we want to run at the edge. I'm going to show off using Next.js with Vercel Edge Middleware. Vercel are actually the creators of Next.js, so they've made the integration extremely smooth with it. But using Vercel's Edge Middleware is not limited to Next.js. You can use it with most any popular front-end Jamstack static site generation framework. You can even use it with your client-side rendered applications, Angular, Vue, React, if you want to push your logic to the edge in those applications as well. So it's not limited to Next.js, but I do want to show it with Next.js because that's where I think it's the smoothest. That's where I like hanging out in the Next.js world. So I'm going to show it there, where we look at creating it from a brand new application from scratch, and then also looking at an existing Next.js application and seeing how we've used Next.js middleware in there to add personalizations. I'm here in my terminal where I want to create a brand new Next.js application to show off how easy it is to get started with Vercel Edge Middleware. So I'll use npx create next app to create a brand new Next.js application. If you're not familiar with Next.js, that's fine. I think it's a really cool front-end framework, especially because it's a hybrid framework. It's built with the ability to do both static site generation and server-side rendering very easily inside of your application. So on a per-page basis, you can actually do static site generation on one page and server-side rendering on the next page. What we're going to be focusing in on is just the static site generation piece because we want to keep that kind of full Jamstack architecture. Next.js is built on top of React. So if you're going to be using Next.js, you will be dependent on React. So if you're familiar with React, you're going to have a pretty easy time with Next.js. I think it's a really great framework that gives you a lot of features out of the box to get you up and running. So that's why I chose it to show off today. So we're going to take a look at our application, open it up in VS Code. Here I am in the index of my brand new Next.js application. So how do we get started with actually pushing logic to the edge? How do we get Vercel to recognize that we want to have this function or this method running at the edge for every single request that comes in? Well, they've made it pretty darn simple, and all we have to do is create a middleware.ts file at the root of our project, and now Vercel will recognize that that file is meant to be distributed across the CDN layer and ran for every single request. So I can create a middleware.ts file. I've got some code that I want to paste in here, and this is going to be the initial middleware function. So this initial function is named middleware. It takes in a request and a response, and it's all we need to start pushing logic out to the middleware layer. It's really that easy. This function right now as it is going to be run for every single request that comes into our application. And with that, we can then modify the response if we want to. So inside of here, let's add a console log and verify that this is being run for every single request. So I'm going to start my development server and we can check it out in localhost 3000. So we can head over to localhost 3000 and see that this is going to be logged out whenever we visit or refresh the page. So here we are in the template for that brand new Next.js application. We've added that middleware.ts, so if I refresh, we should see those in the middleware calls inside of our terminal. And here are all the in the middleware calls. Notice that there's quite a few because this is running for every single request that comes into our application. Let's add more logs so we can see what those requests are. Back in the middleware, I can add the URL that's been requested and that's caused us to become in the middleware. If we refresh our page once more, in the terminal, we now see in the middleware, but also it's printing out the URL of why it got into the middleware. And you can see that we're going not only for the home page, but also a lot of our different chunks, our SVG, JSON. We've got a lot of different calls that are causing us to execute the middleware. While this is great that we have the ability to check every single request, we may not want that functionality. We might want to pare it down a little bit so it only runs for specific routes. So back inside the middleware, I do have this config object, and the matcher property is used to say only if the URL matches this should the middleware execute. And in my case, I have just the /. So it's for if it's only the home page, I should execute the middleware, and we want that pared down because we don't need it running for every single page. Let's verify that's working. Quick refresh, and in the terminal, we see now in the middleware with localhost 3000 is the only request. We only want to have middleware. We only want to maybe personalize the home page. This is an easy way to pare that down. You can have different routes, multiple routes inside that matcher property, but it's a good idea to pare it down so that the middleware is only running on the pages or routes that you really need it to run. If you don't need it on a particular route, you should probably take it out. So the big thing that I mentioned earlier about how Vercel Edge Middleware adds flexibility is the fact that we have so much more information available to us at request time inside of our Jamstack app. We now have this whole request object that gives us a lot more opportunity to see who our user is and where they're coming from, what they're doing inside of our application. We can look at cookie information, credentials information, geolocation information, header information. This is all things that we didn't have available to us before, but now we do inside of the Jamstack application. So it's this information that you're going to use in order to rewrite and redirect the URL so that your users can go to more personalized, relevant content. Take a look at where they're coming from in the geolocation information and send them to geolocation-based information. Have the cookies store information about your user's session so that you can send them the pages that are most relevant for them. This is all possible now with Vercel's Edge Middleware. So let's take a look at a different example. We've got the Sitecore developer portal where I've added a bit of middleware inside of there to personalize based on where the users have gone inside of their session. So I'm using cookies and Vercel Edge Middleware to personalize based on the user's session inside of my full Jamstack application. The Sitecore developer portal is an application built out with Next.js and Jamstack in mind. So it's a great use case to add in Vercel's Edge Middleware. Here's the middleware.ts file for the developer portal page. I've kept it pretty simple here. What we have in this application is cookies that are being tracked to tell where the user has been during their session. So inside of the middleware, I look at the recently visited cookie here on line 7. And based on that cookie, if they visited a particular page, I want to reroute them to a version of the home page that's personalized for them. So you can see if they've gone to the headless services page, I want to rewrite them to that personalized so they have that more personalized experience. The headless home page is a pre-rendered page. I've got it pre-rendered, ready to be delivered to users. And that's how it's so fast. I'm still able to keep that fast Jamstack speed because I have pre-rendered pages, but now I can at least look at the request that comes in and rewrite people to those different pre-personalized pages. Going back to the developer portal, what I've got changing here is this promo. This newsletter archive is what's going to change based on where the user has been inside of their session. Let's say that they do want to go to that headless services page. They head over to headless services. They look around at the different pieces of documentation. Oh, maybe they're interested in the developer trial for our connected demo. I take a peek there. But now, if they go back to the home page, you'll notice that we no longer have the promo about the newsletter. We've got the new one. Are you a headless developer? Review all of our headless docs and tutorials here. So we can take you back to where you were last time that you were on the page. So it's able to see the session that the users are in and modify the home page based on their session. We've got another page that's personalized. If we go over to Mooseend, our marketing automation, we can check it out here. Look at one of our integrations with Sitecore Order Cloud. Maybe you want to do your marketing automation with your e-commerce platform. So we can check it out. If we go back to the home page now, we can see looking to do email marketing automation. With Mooseend, you can dive into the world of email marketing. And now we have this personalized homepage based on the user's session. And this is all done really simply, really easily inside of Vercel's Edge Middleware. We're doing this at the edge. We're looking at what the request is, taking a peek at their cookie information, and based on that, rewriting the URL to send them to a personalized page. Again, this is big for Jamstack. Being able to see that information, be able to take a peek at the cookies, be able to see what header information you have, seeing geolocation, seeing IP information. This is all way more information than we've had before inside of our Jamstack application. And I do want to reiterate, I know I've been showing off examples a lot with Next.js. This is not limited to Next.js. The setup might be a little bit different if you're using a different framework, but feel free to use Gatsby, Svelte, Vue, Angular, React, anything that you want. You can start pushing logic to the edge, pushing logic to that CDN layer, so you can keep that fast, flexible apps and push logic out to the edge. One thing that I would like to make explicit, though, is the dependency on Vercel. This is Vercel's Edge Middleware. So the dependency is that your app must be hosted on Vercel. They have a great hobby tier where everything I've shown you today so far is possible. They've got professional and enterprise tiers as well, but I do want to make it clear that what I've shown does need and require you to be hosted inside of the Vercel environment. Netlify is a competitor as well, and they offer Netlify functions which give you very similar functionality, but just with a little bit different implementation. So the big places where it's easiest to get started with pushing logic out to the CDN layer is with Vercel and their Edge middleware, or possibly Netlify as well. One last thing I want to show off before you leave is Vercel's Edge Functions feature page. This is where they have a lot of pre-built examples to really inspire you and show you off what's all possible inside of their Edge middleware. So if you head down to the bottom of the page, we have this section called Unlock the Potential of Edge Computing. And this is where we have a lot of different code examples of showing how we can use middleware inside of your applications to add functionality, add features, add flexibility to your Jamstack apps. Things like authentication proxy, A/B testing, authentication, JWT authentication, bot protection, geolocation, internationalization, and a lot of different examples are in here. So if you're thinking like, ooh, can I do this logic at the edge? Can I push this to the edge? Come out here and see if there's an example already showing for you. If not, give it a try, start pushing logic out to the edge, add more flexibility to your Jamstack applications, your statically generated applications, by being able to look at the request information that's coming in and modify the response that you send back at the edge at that CDN layer.